We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.
This is WCBU's Out and About. I'm Dr. May Gilliland of ArtsPartners of Central Illinois, and today we are talking with Chip Joyce, the director of the highly anticipated production of Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street at Peoria Players Theatre. The show runs from January 31st through February 9th, with details available on the Peoria Players website. Chip, welcome to Out and About.
Thank you for having me.
So Stephen Sondheim's work is celebrated for its complexity, its genius. What do you think makes Sweeney Todd such a standout in his body of work, and how do you approach directing such a musically demanding show?
I'm not sure that there are any other musicals that are quite like Sweeney Todd. It is a horror musical, but it's also melodramatic. You know, there are horror comedy musicals and things like that, but this is meant to be taken pretty seriously, but there are still kind of some laughs in it. The sort of melodramatic tone, I think, is sort of comes from its background as a Penny Dreadful novel from the 19th century, and, you know, just kind of its evolution from there. Of course, you know, and it was composed by Stephen Sondheim, who was actually a big sort of murder mystery fan and even kind of wrote those on the side. At one point, he thought about quitting his career as a musical theater composer and writing murder mystery novels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But he actually, in his book, Finishing the Hat, he talks about how Sweeney Todd is intended to be a movie for the stage. And with the way the show is underscored and the many layers and the events happening, you can totally see that. And I think, too, you know, this musical was released. It won the Tony Award for Best Musical in 1979, I believe. And we were coming out of the sort of bizarre, you know, we had long left the golden age of musicals behind, and the 70s was, you know, kind of a lot of rock musicals. And we were at that point where it's like, well, where are musicals going to go in the 80s? Well, they went to the mega musical, Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis, and show, you know, the big Cameron Mackintosh musicals. Sweeney Todd I kind of see as a bridge of the two generations of those musicals, you know, kind of the older, you know, there's a big chorus in Sweeney Todd, and, you know, musically it's very complex. And again, Sondheim, you know, really kind of hit his stride in the 70s with all of his shows, is when he was probably the most prolific, writing the most musicals. And while they were all very different, Sweeney Todd was especially very different. And it is a big show, maybe not as big as the ones I mentioned, Phantom of the Opera or Les Mis, but really complex, and you can kind of see the direction that musicals are going to head in after Sweeney Todd.
Can you talk about the incredible local talent involved in this production and how they've risen to the challenge of performing such complex material?
Certainly. Roger Romer is playing Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber himself. I worked with Roger about 15 years ago. We figured out when he played Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha that I directed at Peoria Players. He was also in my production of Rock of Ages there. And he also played in the regional premiere of Les Mis here in Peoria, which I did not direct, but he played Jean Valjean. He is joined by Sharon Russell, who is actually from Bloomington, but she's actually a native of Great Britain, Scottish, I believe. So when you hear her accent, it's real, everybody. And they are joined by Kelly Ferguson as Joanna, Nathan Cuizon as Anthony, Trey Campbell as Beetle Bamford, and Dave Schick as Judge Turpin.
You described this really, it's more than just a show. It's an event. What can we expect when we get there?
I mean, it is an epic musical. I will say it's not a slim, trim 90 minutes. There's a lot going on in the show. And at the end, my hope is that the audience feels kind of drained in a good way.
That was Chip Joyce, director of Sweeney Todd, on stage at Peoria Players Theatre beginning January 31st. Chip, thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Out and About, production of WCBU and ArtsPartners of Central Illinois, designed to connect you with the arts community. Our producer is Jody Holtz. Find this episode at WCBU.org and subscribe to the Out and About podcast wherever you download.
Support for arts and culture coverage on WCBU comes from PNC Financial Services. PNC is committed to supporting local art and culture events in the communities they serve.